is up, everybody? It's DFSC back for the NBA edition of the Deep Dive. Going forward, we'll make this a regular part of your research process. Daily, we'll kick this off New Year's Eve and then ring the new year in with 6 days a week. 5 to 6 days a week, I'll throw the deep dive up there, taking an in-depth look at the slate, what kind of contests you should be entering, how to be contrarian, et cetera, just like we did with MLB. 4-game slate tonight. It's not on the surface an exciting slate. It looks on the surface like it's going to be extremely chalky. But there's a lot of opportunities to be contrarian. There's a lot of opportunities to be really different. What I will say is basketball has been really crazy. It's been probably the most informed DFS basketball season yet. And what I mean by that is some days it's really hard to catch the cash line because you've got the same players everybody else has that's trying to catch the cash line. And it can be frustrating. You don't have to be contrarian in all 9 slots. You only really need to be contrarian in a couple slots and then be strategic with what time on the slate you're being contrarian. And understanding that if you're going to load up 9 players and you're going to be pretty chalky in 7 of those 9 spots, you want to make sure that you've got a couple pieces of the late game that nobody else really has. You don't want to be in a position where your contrarian picks are 3 guys from the first game of the slate, because in any year, one of the most popular things for people to do is just load up on the early games and then hold on. And I've been a big proponent of that's just a recipe for failure. You have to have exposure to the late games to give you the opportunity to pass everybody up who's so invested in the early games. It's an East Coast sport. It's blah, 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 blah. People want to watch their players play. So having said that, there's some opportunities tonight. 4 games. We've got some guys already ruled out. We've got a couple of game time decisions that are looking more towards probable. Doncic is looking like he's probable. Harden is looking probable. Capella is looking probable. Hardaway's been ruled out. So, there's some things that are kind of shaping up. You look at Willie Cauley-Stein is out. Kevon Looney's out. Eric Pascal, a really good spot to be contrarian if, in fact, he plays. Pascal and Smolajak for the Warriors are guys at 3,700, 3,500 that is a good opportunity to be contrarian in the same game, with Marquise Chris probably going to be the chalk power forward number 2 tonight at 4,000. Damian Lee at 6,000 with Russell already ruled out is probably going to be the chalk shooting guard 2 paired with James Harden. That's just going to be, that's just looking at anybody who follows the news of the NBA and plays DFS a couple times a week knows that those are the guys that are going to get the biggest boost with, Russell and Cauley-Stein and these guys out. So right off the bat, there's a couple of spots that you can be pretty contrarian with. Omari Spellman at 3,600. We've seen him have some monster games this season. He's probably the default contrarian play, if you will, to Marquise Chris. People will say, hey, Chris is going to be super owned. I'm going to fade Chris and I'm going to take Omari Spellman. That's not a bad play at all. But early in this season, Eric Pascal was a beast. His price got all the way up to 7,000 on FanDuel. He's 3,700. He hasn't been maybe in favor with Steve Kerr lately, and he's also been battling a bruised ankle. So the minutes haven't really been there. So if there's no minutes, there hasn't been production. But they're so short with bigs tonight. Looney's out, Cauley-Stein is out. You look at who they've got left as far as bigs go, and it's Smolajik, Eric Pascal, Omari Spellman, and that is it. That is it. Obviously, there's Draymond and Glenn Robinson and et cetera, et cetera. These guys are starting. But their bench, as far as bigs go, and we've seen this play out already. Okay, we've seen this play out where they only had wing players and their wings were going to get enormous minutes. And the biggest beneficiary to that was Alec Burks. So their wings are going to get a lot of minutes tonight. They're going to play small. Pascal can play that way. Pascal's a guy that I really like as a contrarian play if he does play. And it's the 7 o'clock or 4 o'clock Pacific time, first slot on the slate. So we'll know. And the other game, a guy that I really want to talk about, is Colin Sexton. If Colin Sexton was listed as a shooting guard, he would be default chalk shooting guard number 2. And he wouldn't be 5,100. And if you're not using the starting lineups page, you just go to the site, click the NBA, click the drop-down tab, go to starting lineups. It's a great tool. Every scoring category that you get points for, we track the averages. And then we track the averages over the last 5 games. So Colin Sexton comes in at 5,100. He's listed as a point guard. Let's talk about Sexton for a minute and how he kind of plays out on this slate. Averaging 30.8 minutes, 19.2 points, 4.4 rebounds, 2.2 assists, and 1.4 steals. 27.78 FanDuel points over his last 5 games. I mean, that's 5x on his price tag. So he's listed as a point guard, and he gets overlooked on a lot of slates. Why is it important that I'm saying he's listed as a point guard? Garland is the starting point guard, and Sexton is the shooting guard. And this is one of those things on FanDuel where they don't have dual position eligibility like on DraftKings. On DraftKings, you could play Sexton, and he's 5,800 on DraftKings, and he's averaging 27.7 DK points per night right now. But because he's a point guard, it's a great opportunity to be contrarian on the slate with Sexton, especially with Murray playing against Golden State, and Murray's at 5.7. We do know that Murray has had the minutes restriction removed. And at 5.7 against the Warriors, he's a really good play. And depending on what happens with James Harden and Clint Capella, if they're both ruled out, which it doesn't seem that's going to be the case, it looks like both of them will play today. But if it's the NBA, if they're both ruled out, Westbrook would be the lock for cash. He'd be the lock for cash at point guard. And there may be enough value on the slate to load up Doncic, Westbrook, and Jokic. Eric Gordon would then come into play. Really nice game, 25.8 FanDuel points within 20 minutes in his first game back. But he would be a real chalky play. So let's get back to Colin Sexton. 5.1 on FanDuel, 5.7 on DraftKings. I really like this spot. If in fact everything plays out the way I think it should, which is Doncic plays, Harden plays, Capella plays, it's really hard to fade Doncic, even against Oklahoma City. With Hardaway out, there's a ton of usage that he's already eating up, and then there's a bit more usage that he'll benefit from. I just think that it's a really good spot for him against not the same Chris Paul, more of a reputation Chris Paul defender, and it's a mismatch in size. Besides, but Doncic to me is the best play at point guard. What do you do with your point guard number 2? People are going to load up one of 2 guys, in my opinion. They're going to load up Kyle Lowry, and they're going to load up Dejounte Murray. And that'll be that. Colin Sexton's 5.1. Yes, he's playing against the Raptors. But I just talked about Chris Paul being a great defender by reputation. The Raptors are not the Raptors right now. No Marc Gasol. No Norman Powell. No Pascal Siakam. It's not the same team. And they're pretty much the opposite of the Warriors right now. where the Warriors have got a bunch of wings that are going to play and not very many bigs. You've got Hollis Jefferson, you've got Chris Boucher, you've got a couple of other guys getting a little bit of run, and then you've got Terrence Davis. And for all intents and purposes, Terrence Davis isn't at 3.9. He's really not in play here. And the reason he's not in play is because Patrick McCaw is starting, and on FanDuel, he's $500 more. You get 31 minutes out of McCaw, and you get 21.8 minutes out of Terrence Davis. So Terrence Davis, it's just not. I don't see the reason to play that card in this spot. Okay, McCaw, that's going to be the guy that's going to be the contrarian play over Damian Lee, in my opinion. But let's just finish up on Sexton. The guy's going to play 30-plus minutes. Toronto is not Toronto. They've got injuries. They've got a bunch of bigs and not a lot of wings. So, they'll start McCaw, they'll start Van Vliet, they'll start Lowry, and then they'll play with a newbie, and they'll play with Ibaka at the center spot. And then Hollis Jefferson and Chris Boucher, they'll rotate in kind of first. Terrence Davis will get a little bit of run. And as a whole, with Kawhi Leonard last year, it's a really good defensive team. Remove Kawhi Leonard from this team, and they're not the best defensive team in the world, especially with what they're working with right now. And one thing you know about Cleveland is their record is terrible, and they're not a great NBA team, but they find a way to score points and be competitive. So 30 minutes plus, almost 20 points a game, filling up all categories on the stat sheet, and it's a guy that nobody's going to look to, and that's Colin Sexton. So that's the first spot to be contrarian tonight, in my opinion. Colin Sexton at point guard. James Harden plays, lock him in. He's going to be highly owned. And rightfully so. It's a good play. The last 4 times he's played against Denver, he's had at least 50 fantasy points. The shooting guard 2 spot, again, looks very, very chalky. I mean, Damian Lee on national television against who the Warriors even play? I don't remember who they played on Christmas. Seems like it was forever ago. He goes bonkers. Goes nuts. So now he's on everybody's radar outside of Northern California. 6,000 looks to be a very fair price. He's a good play. They don't, like I just said, I mean, they're going to play wings tonight. He's a good play. But are you going to load up 9 spots tonight with the same exact lineup that everybody else has? You can't. You can't do it. So McCaw's a guy I really like, and for a lot of the same reasons that I mentioned with Sexton, this is about minutes, okay? What you want to look at here is night in and night out, you want to see who is mispriced for the amount of minutes they're playing, and then is the opportunity there based off what this team gives up to a position. Where's this team's weak spot? Who's lighting them up? So with minutes being the first place to start, McCaw's getting a lot of minutes. I mean, he's playing monster minutes right now. Since Powell went down, he's played no less than 20 minutes. And he's played at least 30 minutes in 4 of his last 7. And played 42 minutes on December 28th against the Celtics. 36 minutes the 29th against Oklahoma City. His last 3 games, he's played 36, 42, and 32. He's streaky, but this is Cleveland. It's a really good spot for McCaw. The minutes are there. It's a good matchup. The upside at 4.3 to go 6x and get you 24 plus fantasy points is there. Hit 42.4 against Boston. 22.4, 23.9. The guy can get you 24. He can get you 24 tonight against Cleveland. And that's 6x. So that's upside to pay off a 4.3 price tag. So in that first game, there's two spots to, in my opinion, be extremely contrarian with and still load up the chalk of a Doncic or a Westbrook and Harden. We move down small forward and power forward, and it starts to get a little bit thin. Will Barton at 6.5 or 6.3 on FanDuel. Enter the chalk, right? Enter the chalk. It's a very thin spot. The way I rank out the small forward position tonight is Will Barton, Rudy Gay, a newbie, Gallinari if he plays, Dorian Finney-Smith, Alec Burks, and Glenn Robinson. The sneaky play is Cedi Osman, playing a lot of minutes. The problem with Osman, though, is that Darius Garland is the point guard. And the reason that's a problem is because last year, Osman had some really big games at this price tag with Colin Sexton playing the point guard and Darius Garland not even in the picture. You had Jordan Clarkson coming off the bench. But now you've got Garland at the point guard, and Sexton is eating up usage as the off guard, and that eats into Osman. So Osman's more of a set shooter right now. He's not playing isolation basketball, and he's really not filling up the stat sheet in all other categories. Last 5 games, 13 points, 3.8 rebounds, 2.2 assists. So that's where I rank him. Okay, I think Burks is the most intriguing of the bunch because it's almost the same price as what Will Barton is at 6.3. Burks is at 5.6, and it's kind of just make one lineup with Barton and then swap a contrarian one out with Burks. So small forward is thin. And down here, you've got Eric Gordon at 4.3. I like Gordon in this spot because it's a tournament play. It's 4.3. You need 24 fantasy points to pay it off. His ceiling's probably 30 to 34. His floor in this spot is probably 15. So it's a riskier play, but it's a play. I just don't think people will avoid this play for one reason: the minutes limit. It's always about minutes. NBA is 100% about minutes. Minutes equal opportunity. Opportunity equals production, and production equals fantasy points. So Gordon is very intriguing from a tournament standpoint. If you were playing a 3-entry max, I might play Gordon in one of those as my small forward 2. But that's how I'm ranking out. I think that the default setting here for people is going to be Barton and Gay. It'll be Barton and Gay. And on a slate like this of 4 games, I don't mind going with 5 chalky guys and then figuring out who the chalk is kind of going to gravitate towards for that number 2 spot and being a little different in a couple of those. And I think the small forward 2 spot, you could be a little bit different and take a little bit of a risk. I mean, Glenn Robinson at 4.6, Alec Burks at 5.6, Gordon at 4.3. A newbie productive at 4.9, shorter rotation. But I do think a lot of people are going to load up Rudy Gay against Golden State here in the small forward 2 spot. And I might have him in 1 or 2 of my 3 lines in like a 3-entry max. I don't know if I would go really chalky at small forward because it's so thin. You can't miss an NBA, right? You can't miss an NBA. And this is a thin spot with not a lot of choices. If you're going to be different, I'm leaning towards being different in the point guard, shooting guard, and power forward spots. Moving on to power forward, Right now, I rank them out like this: Ibaka, Millsap, Love, Draymond, Chris, Boucher, Pascal, and then there's a guy that I absolutely love here. Absolutely love. Gary Harris is currently a game time decision. He's questionable. He was upgraded to probable yesterday and then downgraded today a little while ago to questionable. Dealing with, I believe, a bruised heel. He is dealing with a shin contusion. He's dealing with a shin contusion in an up-tempo game tonight. And I think part of what made this decision maybe a little bit more on the side of caution is because of the guy that I absolutely love tonight and really hope that Gary Harris is out. And that's Michael Porter. Michael Porter, look, he drew a start against Sacramento, played 26 minutes, 19 points, 6 boards and assists, 27.7 fantasy points. Previously against Memphis, he played 18 minutes, 11 points, 4 rebounds, a block, 2 steals, 23 fantasy points. When he gets minutes, he's been productive. He's 3,900 on FanDuel. And it's one of those situations where Chris is going to be he's going to be so chalky. And you could do a couple of things. You could play him in place of Marquise Chris in a lineup. You could play him with Chris and just pay down at power forward. Those are really the two options. But if you don't know who Michael Porter is, I mean, I'd recommend looking into who this kid is, because he's going to be a stud in the league. He's going to be a stud in the league. I mean, the other night I guess it wasn't the other night, it was a little while ago. I mean, he was their first round pick, okay? He's their first round pick and didn't play. Highly anticipated guy to play. And they love him in Denver. And they're being cautious with him, and I'm telling you right now that this kid's going to be something, okay? Coming off a knee injury. Didn't play at all last season. Got a lot of experience. I mean, he's quoted as saying that it was amazing for him to be able to spend the time last year to learn from all the guys around him. He's 6'11", super athletic. He's got a lot of game. So I love Porter at power forward. But a lot of it is it's a 4-game slate. Even if Gary Harris plays and you got 3 entries and like a 3-entry max, take a shot in one of those with Porter. Even if it's pairing him with Chris. If Harris is out and he's going to start, play one that doesn't have Chris in it. Fade Chris. If you fade Chris, then you got to take somebody like Pascal or Spellman or Burks or something like that, and you're hoping that, those guys have the better game than Chris does. We're not very far removed from Marquise Chris being a guy who could not stay out of foul trouble. So, that's always a thing with Chris. A lot of talent, a lot of upside. But that's the power forward position. Center tonight, here's how I rank the center spot. Jokic 1, Capella 2, Jakob Poeltl is 3, Steven Adams 4, Tristan Thompson 5. And I don't, with everything on this slate, I don't think tonight's the night where you take a shot with a Mason Plumlee. The guy can put up a ton of. He's the most selfish player I've ever seen in my life on the floor. That says a lot. I mean, when he gets his minutes, he is all about Mason Plumlee. But he can put up a ton of fantasy points in a small amount of time. So it's 4 games. 2 of these games have the ability to blow out. Cleveland is getting 8. Golden State is getting 11. And then you've got Denver and Houston. It's 4.5 point spread there. And Dallas is at Oklahoma City. It's 3.5 point spread there. So, I think that people are going to have a really hard time paying up for Jokic tonight, especially given the fact that this is not the Jokic of the past. It's just not. It's just not. He's had a couple of really good games recently. The Memphis game on December 28th, he had 31 points, 10 rebounds, 10 assists, 60 fantasy points on FanDuel. But look, he's not had these monster games he was having. He just hasn't. And then looking at Houston and what he's done in the past against Houston and a Clint Capella, you go back to last year, he had 16, 8, and 6 for 38 fantasy points. He had one monster game, 31 points, 13 rebounds, 9 assists. But you've got to go back to February of this year, which is the last NBA season. This NBA season, he's just not the Jokic of the past. He's just not. And a lot of that has to do with Jamal Murray really coming into his own. Jamal Murray, everybody knew 2 years ago Jamal Murray was going to be a stud. Last year he started to progress. This year he's really turned it on. Jamal Murray is another guy at 6.6 that could be extremely, extremely overlooked, and people will get the exposure to Will Barton, and they won't get the exposure to Jamal Murray. He's probably my second favorite contrarian play there. Because I really think that people are going to look at the point guard spot and go, okay, Doncic is playing, Harden's playing. Harden's playing, I don't really want to play Westbrook. This is scenario 1. So let me pair up Lowry with Doncic. Kind of spread my exposure out across the 4 games. I think there's a lot of people who are going to load up Westbrook and Harden and fade Doncic against OKC. And that'll all kind of, those 2 scenarios are kind of going to wash themselves out as far as ownership goes. It'll take care of itself. But the number 2 spot, I don't think a lot of people are going to load up Doncic, Westbrook, Harden. And if you do that, it puts you really, really, really short on salary for your filling out your roster. And yeah, there is value, right? I mean, there is value out there. You got McCaw, talked about at 4.3, Rudy Gay at 4.5, Chris at 4,000, Michael Porter at 3,900, Paul Millsap, he's 4.6. If he doesn't play, you've got Jeremy Grant at 4.2. So there's a value everywhere. But do you want? I don't know what kind of salary that gives you to go Doncic. It's an intriguing way to look at it, though, because center is not the spot that you can really go down to Mason Plumlee. I mean, you can go down to Pirtle. The problem with Pirtle is it's not a comfortable play. It's a tournament play. It's against the Warriors who don't have any bigs at all. Aldridge is going to play. Aldridge is another guy at power forward. You could just pay up at power forward and be different. But that's kind of how you've got to figure this out. So let me just recap here. Harden, probable. It looks probable. Doncic looks probable. Capella looks probable. Then you've got some game time decisions. The first one on the slate is Pascal. Is he going to play or not? If Pascal does not play, I really think that you could look at a minimum value guy like Alan Smolicic or even Amari Spellman at 3.6. I do think you can look at those spots. Gary Harris is a game time decision. And, that's kind of outside of Gallinari, that's where the slate rests. So I really like Colin Sexton at 5.1 being contrarian. I really like Patrick McCaw at 4.3. I think he's contrarian to Lee. And we'll have to wait and see if we get news that leads us into what we'll know on Gary Harris. If Gary Harris doesn't play, I love the combination of Barton, Porter, and Jokic as a stack. And I wouldn't even mind throwing Harden and stacking him with Eric Gordon instead of playing Rudy Gay in that kind of default small forward 2 spot. So that's where I'm at. 4-game slate. Very small slate, but again, it's there's always an opportunity to make a profit on a slate. It's finding out how the build's going to go. A little bit of news just rolled in. Let's see if it's... So James Harden will play. Clint Capella will play. Just coming in now. So, that takes off the Westbrook being chalk, and it puts all those guys back in play. And if all those guys are back in play in this type of a game, I'm going to go with James Harden. I'm going Harden. Denver's a good defensive team. I'm going to load Harden up. I think Harden is one of the locks you put in your lineup today. He can play the pick and roll game with Capella still. Westbrook is going to get his, but if it comes down to shot making, Harden has an innate ability to get to the line. We all know that. Everybody's been frustrated by the foul calls he gets as compared to the rest of the league over the years. And then we'll wait on Doncic, which he's probable. But to me, Doncic Sexton is a good combination. Harden McCaw somewhere in there, a good combination. And then we'll have to wait and see what happens with Gary Harris. But if Harris doesn't play, I do like either Barton and Porter by themselves or Barton, Porter, and Jokic, some combination in that way. I'm going to be big on Porter if he's going to start. I think this kid's got a ton of upside and a ton of talent. He's only going to get more minutes. His role is going to continue to increase. He's a first-round draft pick who didn't play at all last year. They're just being careful with him. But elevating him to the starting lineup in his last appearance kind of says a lot about how they feel about him and where his future's going. So until next time, be cool, keep it cashing. Good luck tonight in your contest. Peace out.